The discovery. The wind howled over the frozen wasteland, carrying sharp ice crystals that cut through the thick suits of the explorers. Captain Reed pulled his scarf higher over his face, his breath turning to mist in the freezing air. His team moved slowly, their boots sinking into the deep snow with every step. "This planet is dead," muttered Carter, the team's scout. He tapped his visor, checking his scanner. No life signs, just ice and rock. "Keep looking," Reed ordered. "HQ said there was something out here. We don't leave empty-handed." The team, 5 in total, spread out, scanning the area. Their mission was simple: investigate strange energy readings detected from orbit. But after hours of searching, all they had found was endless white. Just as Reed was about to call off the search, his radio crackled. "Captain." It was Silva, the team's engineer. "I found something under the snow." Reed rushed toward Silva's location. She was kneeling in the snow, her scanner beeping wildly. The others gathered around. "What is it?" Reed asked. Silva shook her head. "I don't know. Something's buried deep. Metal, maybe. Or," she hesitated, "or organic." A chill ran down Reed's spine, and it wasn't from the cold. "Start digging," he said. They used their tools to clear the snow. At first, there was nothing but ice. Then, Carter's shovel hit something solid. He scraped away more snow, revealing something smooth and metallic beneath. "A pod," Silva guessed. Reed crouched, brushing off more ice with his glove. The metal surface was scratched and dented, as if it had been here for a long time. Then he saw it, a small window, half covered in frost. He wiped it clean. And that's when he saw her. Inside the pod, curled up like a sleeping child, was a girl. She looked human: pale skin, dark hair, fragile features. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted. Her arms were wrapped around herself, as if trying to stay warm. "Is she alive?" whispered Carter. Silva pressed her scanner to the glass. The device beeped, then showed a weak but steady heartbeat. "She's alive," Silva confirmed, "but barely. Her body temperature is dangerously low. If we don't warm her up, she won't make it." Reed made a quick decision. "We're taking her to the shelter. Now." Carter hesitated. "Captain, this doesn't make sense. How is she alive? There's no oxygen in that pod. No food. No heat. And why is she even here?" Reed didn't have answers. But he knew one thing. If they didn't act fast, the girl would die. "Questions later," he said. "Move." They pried open the pod, a hiss of frozen air escaping as the seal broke. The girl didn't react. She was ice cold to the touch, her skin pale as the snow around them. Silva and Carter carefully lifted her out. As they did, the girl's metallic blanket slid off her shoulders. Underneath, her skin glowed faintly, a soft blue shimmer pulsing beneath the surface. The team froze. "What the hell was that?" Carter whispered. Reed ignored the fear creeping into his gut. "We save her first," he said. "Then we figure out what she is." The shelter. They carried the girl through the snowstorm, back to their temporary shelter, a small heated structure built for survival missions. Inside, warmth greeted them, melting the ice off their suits. Silva quickly laid the girl down on a thermal pad, adjusting the settings to raise her body temperature slowly. "That won't be enough," she said. "She needs direct body heat." No one spoke. Finally, Reed sighed. "Fine. We do it the old-fashioned way." He took off his heavy coat and climbed onto the thermal pad beside the girl. The others did the same, using their own body heat to warm her up. It was uncomfortable, but it was the fastest way to save a freezing person. Minutes passed. The girl remained still. Then, she breathed. It was shallow at first, then stronger. Her fingers twitched. A soft noise escaped her lips. Silva checked her scanner. Her vitals are stabilizing. Relief washed over them. But then, the lights flickered. A sudden howl echoed outside. Not the wind, but something else. The temperature dropped sharply, even inside the shelter. Their breath turned to mist again. Reed's instincts screamed danger. Then the girl's eyes snapped open. They weren't human. They glowed bright blue, like ice reflecting the light of a distant star. She sat up, looking around wildly, breathing fast. Then she locked eyes with Reed. And she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're coming." The awakening. The shelter was silent. Only the low hum of the heater and the team's uneven breathing filled the space. Everyone was staring at the girl. Her glowing blue eyes flickered, adjusting to the dim light. She sat upright, shivering, her breath visible in the freezing air. Reed was the first to speak. "Who are you?" The girl didn't answer. She turned her head, scanning the room like a trapped animal, her hands gripping the thermal blanket tightly. Carter stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "You said, they're coming. Who is coming?" Still, no response. Silva checked her scanner. Her body temperature is still low but stabilizing. Heart rate normal. But something's weird. Reed frowned. "Weird how?" Silva hesitated, tapping the screen. "Her readings aren't human. She looks human, but the biometrics don't match. There's something else in her DNA." Reed turned back to the girl. "Can you understand us?" The girl flinched at the sound of his voice. Then, slowly, she nodded. Relief mixed with tension in the room. At least communication was possible. "Where are you from?" Reed asked, keeping his voice calm. The girl opened her mouth, but no words came out. She seemed to struggle, like speaking was difficult. Then, in a weak, whispery voice, she said, "Cold." Carter sighed. "Yeah, no kidding." Silva reached for a flask and handed it to the girl. "Drink this. It'll help." The girl hesitated but took it. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the flask to her lips. She took a sip and immediately gagged, coughing. Carter raised an eyebrow. You'd think someone half-frozen would appreciate warm water. But Reed noticed something. Her cough sounded wrong. Almost mechanical. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered again. A deep rumbling sound vibrated through the ground beneath them. The air grew colder, their breath thickening into mist once more. The girl's grip on the flask tightened. Her glowing eyes widened with fear. "They're here," she whispered. Reed turned sharply to Carter. "Check the sensors." Carter rushed to the terminal, fingers flying over the controls. A second later, his face went pale. "Captain, we've got movement outside. Multiple life forms, surrounding the shelter." Reed's heart pounded. "Show me." Carter pulled up the thermal scanner. Red dots, at least 10, moved in the blizzard, circling them like predators. Silva cursed under her breath. They weren't there before. Where did they come from? Carter shook his head. "No idea. But they're closing in fast." Reed grabbed his rifle and turned to the girl. "Who are they?" The girl was breathing fast now, her body tense. "Not friends," she managed. Outside, a thudding sound echoed through the storm, like heavy footsteps on ice. Then, a low guttural growl. Not human, not like anything they had ever heard before. Silva whispered, "What the hell is out there?" The girl squeezed her eyes shut. "They want me." Reed tightened his grip on his rifle. "Why?" The girl opened her eyes again, glowing brighter now. For the first time, her expression changed, not just fear, but guilt. "Because I ran away." A sudden bang shook the shelter. Something had slammed into the wall. Hard. The entire structure trembled. Dust and ice particles fell from the ceiling. Then came another bang, and another. Reed's instincts screamed danger. Weapons ready. Carter and Silva grabbed their rifles, standing near the entrance. The girl flinched at the sound of their weapons charging, shaking her head violently. "No, no weapons. You don't understand." Reed's voice was firm. "Then explain. Now." But before she could speak, The power went out. Total darkness. The heater died. The screens went blank. Only the girl's glowing blue eyes remained visible in the pitch-black room. Then, from outside, something scraped against the walls. A slow, deliberate sound, like claws dragging across metal. Silva's breathing turned shaky. "Captain." Reed activated his helmet's night vision. Through the reinforced window, he saw shadows moving in the snow. Tall, unnatural, too many limbs. Then a voice. But it didn't come from outside. It came from inside their heads. A cold, whispery voice crawling into their minds. "Give her back." Reed's blood turned to ice. The girl shook her head, her glowing eyes filled with terror. "You can't let them take me." Carter gritted his teeth. "And why the hell not?" The girl swallowed hard. "Because if they do, they'll wake it up." Reed's stomach dropped. "Wake what up?" The girl's voice was barely a whisper. The thing beneath the ice. Another bang. This time, the door dented inward. They were out of time. Reed made a split-second decision. Defensive positions. Silva and Carter aimed at the door. The girl curled up, whispering something in a language none of them understood. Then, the final bang came. And the door burst open. The hunters arrive. The door burst open with a deafening crash, sending metal shards flying across the shelter. A powerful gust of freezing wind howled through the opening, carrying swirling snow and an eerie silence. Reed was the first to react. "Weapons up," he shouted. Carter and Silva aimed their rifles at the dark figure standing in the broken doorway. But it wasn't just one figure. There were many. Tall, unnatural shapes loomed just beyond the entrance, their silhouettes barely visible in the swirling snow. Their limbs were too long, their movements too smooth, almost like shadows bending in the wind. Then came the whisper, not from their mouths, but inside their heads. "Give her back." Reed clenched his teeth, trying to resist the invading voice in his mind. It was cold and ancient, pressing into his thoughts like ice creeping into cracks. The girl gasped, her glowing eyes flickering with panic. She shook her head violently. "No, no, you can't let them take me." Silva tightened her grip on her rifle. "Captain, what the hell are these things?" The creatures took a slow, deliberate step forward. Their eyes were empty holes, blacker than space itself. Their elongated fingers twitched as they reached toward the girl. Reed took aim. "Stay back." Silence. Then, without warning, they attacked. A creature lunged, moving faster than the human eye could follow. Carter barely had time to fire before it was on him, its clawed hand swiping at his chest. He dodged, rolling to the side as the metal wall behind him was shredded like paper. Silva fired, the pulse rifle's blue energy beam lighting up the shelter. The shot hit one of the creatures square in the chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the wound closed, the creature's body knitting itself back together like melting ice reforming in the cold. Carter swore, "These things don't die." Another one rushed at Reed. He fired point blank. The shot passed right through it, as if it were made of smoke. Then it struck. Reed felt something cold pierce his mind, a sharp, icy pain drilling into his skull. He fell to his knees, gripping his head as visions flooded his mind. A frozen wasteland, a massive structure buried beneath the ice, a monstrous shape shifting in the darkness. A voice, ancient, hollow, awakening. Reed gasped, breaking free from the vision just as Silva yanked him away. "Captain, focus." The girl was curled up in the corner, glowing brighter now, her body trembling. The creatures didn't attack her. They only reached for her, as if drawn to her presence. "They need me," she whispered. "But they don't want to save me. They want to use me." Reed gritted his teeth. "For what?" The girl's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Reed saw it. Not just fear, Guilt. They want to wake it up, she said. And they need me to do it. Another bang. This time, from outside. More creatures were arriving. The shelter's defenses wouldn't hold much longer. Carter reloaded his rifle. We can't stay here. Silva's eyes darted toward the emergency hatch in the back of the shelter. We fall back to the caves. It's our only chance. Reed nodded, gripping his rifle. Move. They grabbed the girl and bolted toward the hatch. Behind them, the creatures moved in unison, flowing through the shelter like liquid shadows. The hatch slammed shut behind them just in time. But they weren't safe yet. The caves beneath the ice. The tunnels were dark, twisting beneath the frozen ground like an ancient maze. The walls were smooth, unnatural, as if something had carved them ages ago. Silva panted. How do we know these things don't follow us? The girl shook her head. They won't. Why not? Carter asked, still gripping his weapon. The girl looked up, her glowing eyes reflecting something in the ice walls. Symbols. Markings. She reached out and traced a symbol with her fingers. It pulsed with light. This place is old, she said softly. Older than them. They fear it. Reed studied the glowing symbols. What is this place? The girl hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, a tomb. The air grew colder. Deeper inside the cave, something shifted. A deep, distant rumbling vibrated through the ice, like a heartbeat awakening from a long sleep. Silva whispered, tell me that's not what I think it is. The girl swallowed hard. We have to go. Now. Reed didn't hesitate. Move. They ran, following the tunnels deeper. The markings on the walls grew brighter, lighting their path. But the further they went, the heavier the air felt, like the cave itself was watching them. Then, suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a massive underground chamber. And there, frozen beneath layers of thick ice, something was waiting. A shape, colossal, its form barely visible through the frost. Not dead. Sleeping. The girl shivered, stepping back. This is what they want to wake up. Carter's hands clenched into fists. What the hell is it? The girl turned to face them, her voice barely a whisper. It was a god. Once. Silence. Then, a crack. The ice shifted, just slightly. Enough to know that whatever was inside was starting to wake up. The escape. The crack in the ice spread like lightning, jagged and deep, sending a sharp echo through the underground chamber. The massive shape trapped beneath the frozen surface twitched, its form shifting ever so slightly. Silva stepped back, gripping her rifle tighter. Tell me you all saw that. Carter swallowed hard. Yeah. And I really wish I hadn't. Reed scanned the cavern. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed faster now, reacting to whatever was waking up beneath them. The girl stood frozen in place, her blue eyes locked onto the massive shape. It's starting, she whispered. We have to leave. Now. Reed turned sharply. What is it? The girl hesitated, her glowing hands clenching at her sides. A weapon. A god. A mistake. Another deep crack splintered through the ice, and this time, something shifted beneath it. A low, guttural sound rumbled from the frozen depths, vibrating through the ground like a heartbeat. Then, it exhaled. A long, slow breath, escaping from the ice like trapped air finally breaking free. And with that breath, the temperature in the cave plummeted. Reed's breath froze in midair. Silva shivered violently, pressing a hand to her visor as ice crystals formed inside her helmet. Carter cursed, his gloved hands already turning numb. We won't survive this cold, he shouted. The girl snapped her head toward them, her glow intensifying. She rushed forward, pressing her hands to Reed's chest. A sudden warmth spread from her touch, pushing back the deadly cold. Stay close to me, she urged. I can keep you warm. Reed wasn't sure whether to trust her, but they had no choice. Another deep, monstrous groan echoed from beneath them, and a massive shadow shifted behind the ice. Then came the worst part. The whisper. Not from the girl. Not from the creatures. From the thing beneath the ice. It crawled into their minds like frost creeping over glass, slow and unstoppable. Ancient. Cold. Hungry. You are not welcome. Reed gritted his teeth, pushing the voice out of his head. Run, he commanded. The race against time. They bolted through the icy tunnels, their boots slipping on the frozen ground. The girl led the way, her glowing body cutting through the pitch-black corridors like a beacon. Behind them, the ice continued to crack, the sound chasing them like breaking bones. Faster, Silva panted, glancing over her shoulder. Then came the second worst part. The creatures were back, emerging from the tunnels, their dark, twisted forms slithered out of the shadows, their empty black eyes locked onto the girl. Give her back. The whisper slammed into their minds again, more violent this time. Reed stumbled, nearly losing his balance as pain shot through his skull. Carter aimed his rifle and fired. The blue energy pulse blasted one of the creatures, but it didn't fall. It absorbed the shot. Then it lunged. The girl reacted instantly, throwing up her hands. A pulse of blue light exploded outward, slamming into the creature and sending it flying back. It screeched, its body writhing before it dissolved into mist. The others hesitated. They feared her. Reed stared. What the hell was that? The girl didn't answer. Keep running. They ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, narrowing as the walls pulsed with strange, alien symbols. The cold still clawed at them, but the girl's energy kept them alive. Then they reached the exit. A massive wall of ice blocked their way, but beyond it, they could see the faint glow of the surface. "We're trapped," Carter shouted. "No, we're not," the girl said. She stepped forward, pressing her hands against the frozen wall. Her glow intensified, spreading through the ice like wildfire. Then, a deep, ear-piercing crack. The ice shattered. A tunnel to the surface burst open, revealing the storm raging outside. But then, the ground beneath them collapsed. The descent into darkness. They fell, tumbling through darkness, weightless, as if the planet itself had swallowed them whole. Reed barely had time to react before they hit the ground. Soft snow breaking their fall. Pain shot through his ribs as he forced himself upright. "Everyone okay?" Silva groaned. "Define okay." Carter coughed, shaking snow from his visor. "Where the hell are we now?" The girl sat up slowly, her glowing eyes scanning the new surroundings. It wasn't a cave anymore. It was a chamber. Massive, ancient, filled with towering pillars covered in glowing symbols. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into shadows. And at the center of the chamber, half buried in ice, was a throne. A throne made of obsidian metal, covered in strange, shifting patterns. It pulsed with energy, as if something had just awakened. Silva whispered, "This doesn't look like a way out." The girl slowly rose to her feet, staring at the throne with wide, unreadable eyes. "It's not," she murmured. "It's where it all started." Reed turned to her. "What started?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward the throne. Carter grabbed her wrist. "Hey, bad idea." But the girl's expression was distant, like she wasn't in control anymore. Her fingers trembled as she reached out toward the ancient seat, her body glowing brighter than ever. The symbols on the throne responded, pulsing faster. Then, the throne spoke. "You have returned." The girl froze, her breath hitching. Reed took a step back. "Oh, hell no." The symbols flared to life, filling the chamber with an eerie blue light. The ice beneath them shifted, cracks forming in every direction. And from the shadows beyond the throne, something moved. Something big. Something that had been waiting. The girl finally turned back to Reed, and in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't before. Not just fear. Recognition. She knew what was waking up. And worse, it knew her. The truth revealed. The ancient throne pulsed, sending waves of cold energy rippling through the chamber. The symbols on its surface shifted, rearranging into strange, alien patterns. The girl stood frozen, staring at it like it was calling to her. Reed's instincts screamed at him. "Step away from that thing," he warned. But the girl didn't move. Her glowing hands trembled, her breath unsteady. "You have returned." The voice didn't come from the throne. It came from the darkness beyond it. Carter raised his rifle, his hands shaking. "Ugh, Captain, we've got company." From the shadows behind the throne, something shifted. Then it stepped forward. A massive figure, humanoid but impossibly tall, at least 4 meters high. Its skin was obsidian black, its body covered in the same glowing symbols as the throne. But its face was hollow. A dark, endless void. A beam of pure cold and ancient power. Reed felt something tighten in his chest. This wasn't just another alien. This thing was old. Older than the ruins, older than the ice. The girl's voice trembled. "It's him." The beam took another step forward, its presence making the air thicker, like time itself was slowing down. "The vessel has returned." Reed snapped his rifle up. "What the hell do you mean by vessel?" The girl whispered the answer before the being could. "They made me to hold it," she said, her voice almost breaking. "To contain it." Silva's eyes widened. "Contain what?" The girl finally turned to them, and in that moment, Reed saw it, the truth she had been hiding. Her glowing blue eyes, her body's unnatural warmth in the freezing cold, the way the creatures outside wanted her, not to kill her, but to take her. They weren't hunting her. They were trying to stop her. She took a shaky breath. "I was made to keep the great devourer asleep." The chamber shook, as if the very mention of the name had disturbed something deep within the planet. "The great devourer," Carter repeated. "That sounds bad." The ancient being finally spoke again. "Your time is over. The seal is broken. The cycle begins anew." Then it raised its hand, and the ice beneath them collapsed. The descent into the abyss. Reed's world flipped upside down. He fell. Cold air rushed past his face, his arms flailing as he tumbled into the darkness. The last thing he saw was the girl reaching out for him, her blue glow disappearing into the shadows. Then, impact. Pain exploded through his body as he crashed into something soft. Snow. He gasped for breath, his vision blurry. Somewhere above, he could hear Silva and Carter groaning, also landing nearby. "Everyone okay?" Reed managed. "No," Carter coughed. "I think I left my spine 5 meters up." Silva groaned. "Where the hell are we now?" Reed pushed himself up and looked around. They had fallen into a new cavern, deeper than before. But this one was different. The walls weren't ice. They were flesh, dark, pulsing, alive. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This isn't a cave." Silva's voice was barely a whisper. "It's a body." Then a heartbeat. Slow, deep, powerful, coming from below them. Carter clenched his fists. "You've got to be kidding me." The girl landed next, her glowing form illuminating the chamber. But something was different now. She was brighter. Her glow pulsed in rhythm with a heartbeat beneath them. Reed turned to her. "What's happening?" She took a slow breath. "It's waking up." The choice. The ground shifted beneath them, and something massive moved in the darkness below. Reed turned to the girl, urgency in his voice. "How do we stop this?" She looked at him, her expression torn. I don't know if we can." "That's not an option," Carter snapped. "You said you were made to contain it, so do your damn job." The girl's hands clenched into fists. "It's not that simple." Reed's mind raced. "Why not?" She looked away, and that's when he realized it. She wasn't afraid of the creature beneath them. She was afraid of herself. Reed stepped closer, his voice softer now. "What aren't you telling us?" She hesitated. Then, finally, she whispered, "If I contain it again, I don't come back." Silva's breath caught. "You mean you?" The girl nodded. "I was made to be its prison. If I seal it away, I die with it." Silence. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a deafening roar echoed from below. The great devourer was waking up. The girl turned back to them, determination hardening her features. "You have to go," she said. "Now." Reed clenched his fists. "We don't leave people behind." "You don't have a choice." She stepped toward the edge of the abyss. The glow from her body intensified, spreading across the chamber like liquid light. The fleshy walls recoiled, as if afraid of her presence. "I was never meant to live forever," she whispered. "Just long enough to stop this from happening again." Then she jumped. Reed's heart stopped. Her body descended into the darkness, her glow becoming blinding as she fell toward the great devourer. Then, impact. A shockwave exploded outward. Blinding light filled the chamber, forcing Reed to shield his eyes. Then came the scream. Not from the girl. From the great devourer. A sound of pure agony, as if it were being forced back into its prison. The walls of the cavern collapsed, ice reforming, sealing away the ancient being once more. Then, silence. When Reed finally opened his eyes, she was gone. Only a faint glowing mark remained where she had fallen. And the chamber was silent once more. The monster awakens. Silence. It stretched over the frozen chamber like a suffocating weight. The glowing mark where the girl had fallen pulsed faintly, like a dying ember in the dark. Reed's breath came in short gasps, his hands clenched into fists. His mind refused to process what had just happened. She was gone. She had sacrificed herself to stop the great devourer. Carter stood frozen, staring at the place where she had disappeared. "Tell me that didn't just happen," he muttered, voice hoarse. Silva wiped a gloved hand over her face. She actually did it. Reed forced himself to move. His legs felt heavy, his mind numb. He stepped closer to the glowing mark, kneeling beside it. His fingers hovered over the light, the warmth barely noticeable in the freezing air. The girl, whatever she had been, was gone. And yet, the air still felt wrong. Reed's gut twisted. His instincts screamed at him. Something wasn't right. Then, the mark flickered. A pulse of cold energy rippled through the cavern, and a deep, distant growl rumbled from the abyss below. Carter stepped back. Captain." The ground trembled. A new crack splintered across the ice, crawling toward them like veins of frost. Then, from deep within the abyss, a single, massive claw emerged. The nightmare returns. The claw was twisted, covered in ancient runes that pulsed with an eerie blue glow. It flexed, the ice around it groaning as it began to break free. Silva cursed. No. She was supposed to stop it. Reed's stomach dropped. She didn't stop it. She only slowed it down. Another claw erupted from the ice, followed by a deep, unearthly howl that made the cavern shake violently. Carter's hands trembled on his rifle. "Tell me we're not about to fight a god." The ice shattered. A colossal form began to rise from the depths, its body impossibly large, its dark tendrils stretching into the shadows above. The great devourer. Even in the dim glow of the ancient symbols, Reed could see its shape shifting, twisting between something alive and something unreal, a form that defied logic. Its face, if it had one, was a void deeper than the blackest part of space. And then it spoke. "I remember." The voice wasn't sound. It was inside their heads, an overwhelming weight pressing down on their minds. Reed felt his thoughts unravel, his vision distorting as memories that weren't his flooded his mind. Visions of the First War. The collapse of an ancient civilization. The great devourer had woken before, and it had taken everything to stop it. And now it was free. Reed gasped, shaking his head to break free from the visions. "We need to get out of here," he shouted. But Silva wasn't moving. Her eyes were glowing blue. Reed grabbed her shoulders. "Silva, snap out of it." She gasped as if breaking free from a drowning current. What the hell was that? Carter dragged her back as another massive tentacle rose from the abyss, slamming down where they had just been standing. Reed activated his comms. "Base, we need emergency extraction. Now." Static. The Devourer's presence was blocking communications. "We're on our own," Carter muttered. The chamber collapsed further, and the ice ceiling above them began to crack open. Reed could see a sliver of the frozen storm above. The surface. "There's our exit," he shouted. But the great Devourer wasn't going to let them leave. It reached for them, a massive shadowy limb, twisting and writhing as it lunged toward them with inhuman speed. Reed fired his rifle. The energy blast vanished into the void, swallowed by the monster's endless hunger. Carter and Silva fired too. Nothing worked. Then, the girl's voice. "Run." Reed's heart stopped. He turned and saw her. The return. She wasn't fully there. She stood in the middle of the cavern, her body flickering, as if caught between existence and non-existence. Her glowing blue eyes burned brighter than before, her presence somehow stronger than it had been in life. "That's not possible," Silva whispered. The girl's gaze locked onto Reed. "I don't have much time," she said, "but I can still stop this." The Devourer roared, its colossal form shifting, turning toward her. It recognized her. "You failed before," it whispered, its voice shaking the cavern. "You will fail again." The girl lifted her hands, and the glowing symbols on the walls flared with energy. "Not this time," she said. The cavern shook violently as light erupted from the ice. The ancient runes burned white-hot, forming a massive barrier between the creature and the team. The Devourer howled in rage, its tendrils slamming against the barrier, but the light held. The girl turned back to Reed, urgency in her voice. "You have to get to the surface. I can't hold it forever." Reed hesitated. "We're not leaving you behind." She shook her head. "I'm already gone." Her flickering form started to fade, the barrier weakening. Reed gritted his teeth. Damn it. He turned to his team. "Go. Climb." Carter and Silva scrambled toward the broken ice, clawing their way toward the opening above. Reed took one last look at the girl. "You're sure about this?" She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "This is what I was made for." Then she turned to face the Devourer. The light around her intensified, burning like a supernova. The Devourer screamed as the energy surged, trying to consume it once more. Reed climbed. He didn't stop, didn't look back, he just moved. Then, the final explosion of light. Blinding, silent. The last thing he saw before reaching the surface. The girl, standing in the light, facing the monster alone. Then, darkness. The final choice. Blinding light filled the cavern. Reed barely made it to the surface before the explosion of energy erupted behind him, shaking the entire frozen wasteland. He stumbled forward, his vision burning white, the ice beneath his boots cracking as the shockwave blasted outward. Then, silence. The howling wind of the storm returned, but nothing else moved. Carter and Silva collapsed in the snow beside him, gasping for breath. Their faces were pale, their bodies shaking from the sheer cold and exhaustion. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Carter coughed. "Tell me it's over," he muttered. Reed turned, looking at the massive ice crater behind them. The cavern they had just escaped from had caved in completely, sealing whatever lay beneath it forever. Or at least, that's what he hoped. Silva ran a trembling hand through her helmet's cracked visor. "She's gone." The girl. The strange, glowing girl who had saved them all. Reed clenched his jaw. He didn't want to accept it. He had seen her fade into the light, making the ultimate sacrifice to keep the great devourer locked away. But something inside him whispered, it wasn't over. Not yet. The waiting silence. The team sat in the snow, staring at the collapsed ruin, listening to the sound of their own breathing. The storm still raged, but the unnatural cold from before, the kind that had come from the devourer's awakening, was gone. Carter exhaled, his breath visible in the freezing air. We should call for evac. Reed tapped his comms. Command, this is Captain Reed. Do you copy? A brief burst of static then. Reed, you're alive. What the hell happened out there? Reed exchanged glances with Silva and Carter. How was he supposed to explain? We found something ancient. We found something that shouldn't exist. And we lost someone to stop it. Instead, he just said, it's a long story. We need extraction, now. Copy that. ETA 20 minutes. Hang tight. 20 minutes. Reed nodded, but deep inside, something still felt wrong. Like a story left unfinished. The ice cracks again. Then, just as Reed was about to say something, the ice beneath them shifted. Silva jumped to her feet. Tell me you heard that. Carter raised his rifle. Not again. Reed's breath caught in his throat. His hands instinctively reached for his weapon. But what he saw next was impossible. The collapsed ruins began to glow. Faint at first, a soft blue shimmer, then brighter. A familiar color, a familiar light. Silva whispered, no way. Then, the ice cracked open, and she stepped out. The girl returns. She stood in the shattered ice crater, whole, alive, but different. Her body still glowed, but now her form was less human. Her skin was translucent, her eyes burning like twin suns. The storm didn't touch her. The wind didn't move her hair. She had changed. She had become something else. Carter took a step back, whispering, what is she? Reed's heart pounded. I don't know. The girl slowly lifted her gaze to them, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was something more. I did it. The devourer is sealed. Silva exhaled. You're alive. The girl tilted her head, as if thinking. I am. Different. She raised a hand, and for a brief moment, the storm around them stopped. The wind froze mid-motion, the snowflakes hanging in the air as if time itself had hesitated. Then she lowered her hand, and everything resumed. Reed's throat felt dry. What are you now? The girl looked at her hands, flexing them like she was testing a new body. I was made to be a prison, she said. But when I sealed the devourer away, I became something more. Carter's voice was quiet. More what? She turned her glowing eyes toward them. Something new. The final choice. Reed felt a strange weight in the air, like the moment before a storm. The girl had changed, but she was still herself, or at least what was left of her. She saved them. She saved the planet. But now she stood between two worlds. You can come with us, Reed said, his voice steady. We can help you. For the first time, she smiled. You already did, she said. Then she turned away. Silva took a step forward. Wait, where are you going? The girl looked back, and for the first time, there was something almost human in her expression. I was created for one purpose, she said. Now I am something else. I need to find out what that means. Reed wanted to stop her, to tell her she wasn't alone. But he knew some journeys couldn't be taken together. The girl raised a hand, and the ice beneath her shimmered. Then, without another word, she vanished. Gone, like a whisper in the wind. The aftermath. The rescue team arrived minutes later. They found Reed, Carter, and Silva standing at the edge of the crater, staring into the empty space where she had disappeared. The lead officer approached. Captain, what happened here? Reed glanced at Carter and Silva. Then he turned to the officer and said, Nothing you'd believe. As they boarded the AVAC ship, Reed took one last look at the frozen wasteland. The ice was silent again. The storm had passed, but something told him this wasn't the end of the story, just the beginning.